It's purely for within the member area of the TPAS site so that people can catch up with it or want to replay it afterwards, or anyone want to go and check on again. So I think no further ado, over to Ella. Welcome.
Hello, morning everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm just going to try and share my screen. Can everyone see my screen? Yep, excellent. Okay. So yeah, thanks David. Thanks for that lovely introduction. Thank you so much for inviting me this morning. My name's Ella Smiley and I'm a co-founder of Benthyg Cymru, which I'm going to tell you all about. As David said, we are focused on building a network of libraries of things around Wales and eventually the world. You know, we're not stopping at Wales. And just, I mean, the term library of things sounds quite self-explanatory, and I will talk a little bit about exactly how it works and all the kind of questions that you've probably got floating around your head. But just to be clear for everyone, a library of things is a place where you can borrow things. So there are different libraries of things around the world that all do it slightly differently, but essentially the concept is a place where you can borrow something as and when you need it, in the same way that you might borrow a book from a traditional library. So I've got some slides. I'm going to go through a little bit of background to what we do, a little bit of detail about how we do it, and how we're supporting communities, and then got some exciting news at the end for how we're hoping to work with housing associations going forward, because we think that, you know, what we do could be a really valuable resource for housing associations, and we really want to focus this year on how we can work with all of you. So another thing to say before I start is that Benthyg is a Welsh word meaning borrow or lend, just for those of you who don't know. We have had some people suggesting that the name is too Welsh and that we should, you know, use an English name. We're digging our heels in about that. We are proud of our name being Benthyg Cymru, and we think that everybody should learn that that's a Welsh word meaning borrow or lend. And so, you know, much like a kind of IKEA concept, we're hoping that in a couple of years' time, everyone globally will know that Benthyg means borrow or lend. So there we are. Before anybody suggests we change our name, there's the answer to that question. So as David mentioned, Benthyg Cymru is made up of me and two others called Becky and Jane. And together we co-founded Wales's first library of things in East Cardiff in 2017. And since then, we've spent a lot of time developing all the sort of policies and processes and systems that you need to run a library of things. We've made some mistakes along the way, so hopefully you don't need to. And while we were doing that, we were always keeping an eye on using that experience to share that learning, to create something that could be genuinely helpful for other communities. That was our intention before we even started, but it was very much evident as soon as we started, as soon as word started to get around what we were doing, we started to get inquiries from communities everywhere around Wales and actually beyond Wales as well, asking for our help. And so we spent a lot of time in those first few years kind of holding people back, saying we're not actually the experts yet, but we're trying to be, and we'll let you know when we're in a position to help. And now happily we are in a position to help. And so what we are doing is kind of sharing our learning around the network to help people set up their own libraries of things. Another thing that we've been doing since 2017 is engaging with a kind of informal UK-wide network of libraries of things. Since around sort of 2015, 2016, the concept has grown quite quickly within the UK. I was living in London in 2015. I had a brief 20-year hiatus in London before coming back to Wales. And I was involved in the Library of Things there. And there's, as well as the one in London, there are libraries of things in Frome and Edinburgh, and various other places around the UK. And there's a core of us that have been kind of active since about 2015, 2016, that we've got this sort of informal network. We've met up and had a kind of conference-y type thing, and we meet up relatively frequently and just talk about what's going on, just kind of check in with each other and share our advice and insight on everything from like how to fix a pressure washer to where to get the best insurance policies. So that's something that we are kind of involved in, and the opportunities there to share learnings and best practice means that we're kind of getting out of our own project a little bit and just checking in with other people and making sure that we're kind of along the right lines. And as well as the Library of Things network, we've been developing strong partnerships with other organisations. There's loads of really exciting stuff going on in Wales around circular economy and sustainability. Like Repair Cafe Wales. So lots of the other libraries of things in the UK kind of have grown up with a repair element sort of integrated in it. In Wales, it just so happens that we've done it slightly differently. We've got libraries of things and we've got repair cafes as different organisations, but we think it's really important that we work closely together. A lot of our stakeholders expect repair and reuse to be hand in hand, and luckily we work really well with Repair Cafe Wales, and we've got a lot of sort of joint working and projects and partnerships going on with them. So what we've done, since 2017 is develop this kind of blueprint for setting up a library of things in order to provide the support for communities around Wales that we know there's a demand for. So what we're trying to do is on a practical level kind of use all of the expertise that we've developed in the last few years to help communities create places where people can donate items they own but don't need, borrow items they need but don't own, and get together to share knowledge and skills. And our vision is really to make borrowing in Wales as easy as popping out for a loaf of bread. We want people to think of where they can borrow something before they think about buying it. Obviously, there's quite a few things that need to happen before we reach that level of like attitudinal and behavioural change. But the first thing we need to do is raise the profile of borrowing and just make it easy and accessible for people to know where they can borrow from and make that process as easy as possible. So that's what we're essentially working towards. And we see the benefits of that as being really kind of multiple. It's about maximizing the resources in our community, the stuff that's already been made and manufactured and shipped to our communities that's sitting in the back of people's cupboards, making use of all of those things, and also about maximizing the kind of skills and experience in our communities. There may be somebody 3 doors down from you who's really good at putting up shelves, who can help you when you're doing that. And they might want to get some advice from you on the thing that you're really good at. And so by creating these facilities where people can learn skills from each other as well as share the stuff that they need to do those tasks, we think is really positive. And in terms of the Wales-wide network, we want to make borrowing, a really kind of common feature in Wales, because we think that there are much wider advantages. So say, for example, if you want to go camping in West Wales, if you didn't have to load a massive diesel car up with all of your camping gear for your whole family and transport it to the campsite, if you knew that you could reserve the stuff that you need when you get there, then that would mean you could take public transport, or you could go in a much smaller car with your family. So we think the benefits of being able to do that go beyond the sort of minimizing landfill, that there are actually huge benefits for sustainability and community resilience. But in terms of setting up this network, what we don't want to do is create a kind of franchise model where we're just kind of parachuting in and creating sort of identikit versions. I should have said on my previous slide, I've got a picture here, beautiful artist's impression of what a repair space and library of things is going to look like in Swansea. This is a project we've been working on with Swansea Council that's going to be launching in May, and it looks beautiful. It's on a recycling centre, so it's pretty glamorous for a recycling centre, I've got to say. They've had a healthy budget to create that, but that's not what a repair cafe and a library of things has to look like. The one that I'm launching today is essentially a storeroom in the back of a shop with a counter at the front of it. It looks very different, but it does the same thing. And there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's about understanding what works for your community. So we're not about parachuting in identikit versions and saying it has to look like this, it has to be on brand, you have to have exactly the same processes and prices in place, for example. We want to support communities because they know what works for them. We want to support communities to create things that are tailored to their needs, to their environment. In Wales, we have massive geographical differences in our environments and the sizes of our communities. And so really we want to work with communities to understand what's going to work from them, and for the creation of libraries of things to be tailored by them. So we want to kind of support with the expertise and the processes that we've developed, but really to make sure that each facility is led by its community, is owned by its community. And we've got various things we do to work with those communities to make sure that that happens, such as setting up steering groups that include a variety of different people from within the community, so you're not creating a sort of echo chamber. And just, with the intention, focusing on that kind of core ethos of creating facilities that are really accessible and affordable, where everybody's included. And so some of the ways we do that is, like I say, by the steering groups, also through the pricing. We suggest to communities that they set their own pricing for borrowing fees in a way that suits their communities. That's not something we prescribe. We also suggest that libraries of things have non-cash alternatives to make sure that anyone can borrow. So those non-cash alternatives might be time credits, or they might be just straight swaps for volunteering time and sort of skill sharing. It's important to note, I think, that people who have no recourse to public funds aren't allowed to participate in time credit schemes. And so having an option alongside that, such as just a straight swap for volunteering time and skill sharing, is really important to make sure that everyone's included. We also work with communities to come up with ways to market the Library of Things creatively to their community. So as well as using social media, that's everyone's kind of go-to, thinking about how you can use more traditional media like posters or leaflets in community centres, word of mouth, as community groups start to meet in person again, how can you make sure you're having those kind of face-to-face conversations and not depending on social media, because not everybody accesses social media. And the other thing that we're really, really keen on is partnership working and collaborations. We don't want to be in a community and be working like within a vacuum on a Library of Things. There are so many exciting community initiatives going on at the moment. There are people doing all kinds of things in terms of how they're repairing and reusing and sharing items that are slightly different from what we're doing. And we want to work with all of that and make sure that we're kind of building on everybody's strengths rather than trying to kind of create a kind of, siloed facility that's, just focused on one thing. So we're very open to being really flexible and making sure that every project that we work on is really tailored to the needs of its community. And I've got this far without talking about the why. That's generally because everybody just gets it. I'm sure everybody in this virtual room right now understands the why, but I'm going to give you some stats anyway, just in case you need to kind of sell it to anyone internally. So the Ellen MacArthur Foundation estimates that 80% of household items are used less than once a month. I can think of plenty of my household items that are used even less than that, such as my iron and ironing board. And a drill, for example, various studies, a drill is the one that for some reason everyone studies because it's just, automatically everybody goes, oh yeah, my drill. So different studies suggest 6 to 20 minutes in its entire lifetime. That's often quoted as 13 minutes because I think that's an average of 6 to 20, but there are different studies. And, that regardless of whether it's 6 or 20 minutes, when you think about like the raw materials used to manufacture a drill, the amount of energy and resource that goes into manufacturing process and then shipping it somewhere, and then the distribution on however many lorries, and then even that final mile of you driving to B&Q in your car to pick up a drill and build it and bring it home in order for it to sit in the back of a cupboard. That's just a huge drain on resources, and pretty much everybody has that drill sitting in the back of a cupboard that is used that little in its entire lifetime. So that's a really good example of how we're all kind of assuming that we need to own one of everything, or actually we don't. It's perfectly feasible to have one drill per however many people, and that drill gets used by whoever needs it whenever they need it, and then it gets maintained and kind of stored communally. That's a really obvious way to reduce our consumption. But also, as well as that kind of sort of landfill environmental element, something I've noticed recently is that there's a real trend, particularly online and on Netflix series, of like organizing your life and decluttering your life and buying different storage solutions to organize all of your stuff. And, it occurs to me, I'm as bad as anyone else in buying that. I get sucked into all of that. My husband's always, raising his eyebrows when I go to Wilko and come back with yet more fridge storage. But I think perhaps we need to ask ourselves the question, if we're putting so much effort into organizing our stuff, maybe we just own a bit too much stuff. And maybe the reason we're so excited about all of these new storage solutions is that this stuff is stressing us out. You know, we've all got enough stress going on in our lives today without having that sinking feeling of like, oh, I need to get my drill. Oh, it's in the back of that cupboard. I don't want to go into that cupboard. I don't know what else I'm going to find when I look for my drill. You know, so actually the stuff we own, the clutter in our homes creates stress as well. And for a lot of people, you know, homes that are being built these days are, you know, tend to be smaller. There's less storage space. And so maybe we just don't have the space to store all the stuff that we used to. But, you know, as well as the fact that we all have all of this clutter, there are still massive inequalities in our communities. There are some people who have loads of stuff and too much stuff that's creating this stress, and others that don't have the things that they need, that don't have access to the DIY or gardening equipment that actually would make their lives a little bit better or a little bit easier. And so there's this weird kind of inequality going on. And it's not just the inequality of stuff, it's also the inequality of skills. So like I was saying before, you know, we've got all of these skills in our communities. I bet there's somebody who lives, you know, on your street or on your floor where they have a skill that you would really benefit from. And if you could only meet that person and put a name to their face, then you could kind of benefit from that skill, and they could probably benefit from something you could share with them. And so for all of these reasons, we think that creating libraries of things where you can donate things you don't need, borrow things you need but don't own, and share the knowledge and the skills in your community is a really effective way to create economic and social resilience on an individual level, but also more widely on a community level. So I'm sure you've got lots of questions about how you do it. And I mean, like I said, there isn't one right or wrong answer. What we're doing is helping people kind of put the foundations in place for how to run a library of things, how to mitigate risk and make it as easy as possible for volunteers to come in and do something and go again. But, you know, we're still very much at the beginning of like scratching the surface really of how this can work. We've got an idea and a vision of how it can work, but we're having to challenge ourselves every day. Ideally, a library of things would have loads of different things to borrow, you know, not just a drill, but like a screwdriver set and a spanner set, and camping equipment and gardening equipment and toys for children, dressing up stuff for children. I think that's something that we should be, you know, always borrowing instead of buying, because how often do children grow out of those things and you end up with a box of dressing up stuff? You know, those are the kinds of things that I think we can be borrowing. But because the concept is still becoming understood, it's still something where, you know, I think we're still learning what people want to borrow, what they're willing to borrow, what they're willing to donate, what they're willing to share. So at the moment, we encourage the projects that we work with to just have as wide a range of items as they can fit in. Obviously, space is often at a premium, so you have to apply a little bit of, you know, thinking around what you can actually store. But generally, we encourage people to have quite a wide range of stuff and just start to understand what people want to borrow. Most of the items that our libraries of things would have are donated, because we're trying to maximize the stuff that's already within our communities. But in some cases, some of the projects we're working with have a bit of budget to buy some new things, which, you know, there's an advantage to having like new kind of drills and DIY tools that are going to last. So there is, you know, an argument there that sometimes it's worth buying some new items. And also, if our projects have budget, we suggest they buy something like a pressure washer and a gazebo, because we know those things are really popular. They tend not to be donated because they're quite high value, and they're the kinds of things that we know some people want to borrow pressure washers, and then once they come in and they've borrowed that and they've signed up to the database, then you can email them and say, oh, look what else you can borrow. And so it's kind of, you know, just getting them used to the idea. We use an online borrowing platform I'm going to talk about in a minute that helps you or enables you to sort of browse and reserve and even pay for stuff online. And it also automates a lot of the processes, which helps with risk mitigation and all that kind of volunteer task management. And I think those bullet points are pretty self-explanatory. Yeah, all right, I'm going to talk about insurance and risk mitigation in a few minutes. And yeah, our policies and processes and systems just make all of this kind of stuff as easy as possible for our partners to just go in and start doing it, rather than ask all of the questions that we've already been through ourselves. So the online borrowing platform that I've mentioned, it automates a lot of this stuff for you. So it really does take a lot of the sort of hard work out of it. When we started doing it on a spreadsheet, thinking, oh, how hard can it be? Turns out it's quite hard to do it on a spreadsheet. So we use this off-the-shelf product called Lend Engine. There's a couple out there. There's Lend Engine and MyTurn, and we use Lend Engine. They're very similar. It enables you to automate a lot of the functions that you'll need as a library of things. So Lend Engine is used globally by tool libraries and sling libraries and toy libraries, and it's been translated into loads of different languages. The main reason we chose it over MyTurn was that it was developed in Ceredigion, so obviously we try and keep suppliers within Wales as much as possible, and the massive benefit of it is it just makes everyone's life easier and supports risk mitigation. I'm going to talk about risk mitigation in a minute, but it's really important to have that kind of like paper chain of risk mitigation, as well as knowing in the processes that it's there, and Lend Engine just helps you to do that really easily. So on Lend Engine, you can browse and reserve items online. So this is generally what a kind of page of items would look like if you were searching for DIY tools. You can see a picture, you can see the main information, what it's called and how much it's going to be to borrow. And then you can click on it and find out more details about that item. In the kind of back end of the site for admin and volunteers, it creates maintenance tasks. You can add your own maintenance tasks. If there's something unique to you or something you're particularly keen to do. For things like PAT testing, you can set that to be every 6 months in line with our policies. And then it flags it up at 6 months, and members can't borrow it. They can't reserve it until that maintenance task has been done. So it's really helpful in terms of just making sure that all of that risk is being mitigated. It also does a lot of reporting for you, as well as a kind of at a glance status on what's been reserved and what's already out on loan. It enables you to go into quite a bit of detail. This is just what you see on the kind of dashboard in the admin section, but you can go and pull out reports in quite a lot of detail. So that's really helpful, if you're reporting into stakeholders and funders. It's really helpful in terms of your own marketing to communities as well. But also we think on a network level, it's really exciting if we can get lots of libraries of things using the same borrowing platform, using it consistently, and then collating all of that data in a way that will help us understand borrowing behavior, borrowing patterns. We can use postcodes as a proxy for demographic, and we can start to kind of collate that and track it and report it in a way to stakeholders that I think will be really exciting, and also creates opportunities for us to do research around what we can do to kind of increase borrowing and move towards that attitudinal and behavioural change that we're really keen on. So here are the risk mitigation touch points. And I love the fact that you probably won't be able to read that because we've got so many risk mitigation touch points that the writing's gone really small. So yeah, lots of people are keen to know. Obviously, there is risk in having second-hand power tools that you are lending out to people. There is a risk there. Let's not shy away from it. It's really important that we have lots of processes in place that minimize that risk, because you can have insurance in place. And if you need to make an insurance claim, the first thing your insurer will ask is, what did you do to try and prevent this from happening in the first place? And so a lot of our policies and processes are anticipating that question. So if you're in that position, which by the way, no library of things in the UK has been yet. So it's, it's not as risky as you might think, but we're aware that that risk is there. So if that happens, then you can say, these are the things that we've done to mitigate that risk. And so your insurance policy will remain valid. So things like having a written handbook and policies and induction processes for your volunteers, having really clear policies on things like PAT testing and maintenance, making sure that your member's ID is checked before their first borrow, so you do know where they live. Having PPE information on item listings linked back to the manuals for those items. So if you're lending out a hedge trimmer, you can check the manual to see what the manufacturer recommends, what kind of PPE is used, and then you can put that on Lend Engine so that when somebody borrows it, they can see what's recommended. And then we recommend having automated checkout processes in place so that when a volunteer or a member of staff is checking it out, they have to physically tick a box to say, I've asked that person if they've got the right PPE. The automated emails will include links back to the borrower's agreement and the liability waiver. So every time you make a reservation, you borrow something, you get an email saying, don't forget, by borrowing, you are confirming that you're going to use it responsibly and safely, and you're responsible for using the correct PPE. So all of these risk mitigations are in place to try and keep everybody safe, basically. And that's all included in our toolkit. So this is what our toolkit looks like. If you sign up as a member of the Benthyg Cymru network, you get access to our website. If you're a volunteer, you can access the volunteer handbook. So because we're continually updating and reviewing these things, it's not like a kind of hard copy of like, here's your stuff and then we go away and that's done. This is all these are all documents that are being continually updated and added to. We're working with a number of projects at the moment where, occasionally the project team will say to us, oh, it'd be really helpful if we had like that risk mitigation slide I just showed you. A project asked me for that a few weeks ago. I put it together for them. Now it's in the toolkit. So that toolkit is continually being updated and reviewed. And our intention is very much to keep doing that. So as we build the network, keep that under review. And actually there's going to be huge potential as the network grows to share information, to share best practice, to share our understanding, and just keep building on that toolkit. And we're also keen to put together kind of little committees within the network so that the network kind of has communication going on that doesn't necessarily involve us on the Benthyg Cymru team, but it enables members of the network to get together and talk about what's working for them and then bring suggestions back to us of how we can improve on what we're delivering to support the network. So at the moment, we're working on projects in Pembrokeshire, Swansea, Penarth, which is opening at 12 o'clock today, and Monmouthshire, where they're actually going to have 4 libraries of things across the county. There's a couple more that are in the pipeline that I'll mention in a minute. But you'll notice from that map, it's looking very South Wales heavy, which I have to assure you isn't intentional. We are very keen to have a broad spread across Wales. There is one in the pipeline in Llandrydnod, so we're starting to move our way up through mid to North Wales, but we're really, really keen to work on that, and we've got various practical plans in place to make that happen. But just a public shout out today, if there's anyone here who lives in North Wales and South Wales who wants to have a conversation with me after this meeting, we're really keen to start moving north. So in terms of housing associations, I probably don't need to spell out to you why we think that we would love to work with housing associations. We think that what we could do could be a really valuable resource for tenants within housing associations. We think we could help housing associations move towards achieving their objectives around sustainability and decarbonisation in a really demonstrable way. And we know that housing associations have space, and that at the moment in particular, with high streets struggling and businesses struggling, that there might be some empty spaces where actually it might be really valuable to turn that into this kind of community facility. So we think there's real potential there for us to work with you. And the exciting news is something that we haven't publicly announced yet, so keep this under your TPAS hat for now. But we are really excited that we're going to be working with Newport City Homes starting imminently on a project they're working on in Skinner Street in Newport, which is really central within Newport. We're going to be setting up a permanent repair and library of things space in partnership with Repair Cafe Wales. And what we're doing with that project, as well as kind of working to bring repair and reuse to Newport, they've got loads of really exciting reuse stuff going on already in Newport. So we'll be adding to that rather than bringing it to Newport, but, creating a library of things for the first time in Newport. We really want to work closely with TPAS Cymru on that project to make sure that what we're doing in Newport creates something that can be scalable around housing associations. And so we want to create a steering group with TPAS Cymru members where you can come and see what we're doing, where we can talk about how it's working in practice. We can talk about the challenges and the strengths of the Newport project and start to understand how we could use that learning to work with other housing associations, and ideally in a year or two be in a position to actually do the same thing in other housing associations really quickly based on that learning. So we're really excited that we've got this project in the pipeline, that we're hopefully going to be kicking it off really soon, and we're really hopeful that we'll be able to get some practical support from you, and that in return we'll be able to support you imminently in setting up libraries of things. So I think that is it for my presentation. Oh no, look at that. My last slide has gone weird. Anyway, if you want to, I was doing so well. If you want to stay in touch, I would love that. Our website is benthyg-cymru.org. My email is there, slightly covered by the logo, but you can probably work it out. And you can follow us on social media. And I'm sure David and Elizabeth would be happy to pass my email address on after this presentation if anybody needs it. So that's it from me. I'm bored of the sound of my own voice by now, so I'm very much hoping you've got some meaty questions for me. David, I'll hand back over to you.
Thank you very much. What a wonderful whistle tour. I don't know what people knew about Library of Things already or not, but I think that's just given us a real exciting overview of the potential of this. I know one's opening in my area, say today, Penarth. I'm looking forward to going down and seeing that. I've already registered. I've already scanned the catalogue. I just wondered whether, using the chat on the side, whether you could start putting some thoughts on there. I know there's been a number of comments. Claire, you've said, that's a really interesting point I never thought of, but I wasn't sure what that meant, Claire Evans. Do you want to just say what that is?
Oh, yeah, that was just when you were talking about, because I'm one of those who get quite excited over, oh, let's buy storage to put my things in so that everything looks clean. And then I was like, actually, I'm doing the most worst thing in the world by buying more plastic to put my plastic that's in my cupboard in to make it look like my plastic cupboard's all tidy. It really resonated with me that actually, yeah, like you said, that we have too much stuff. And I was like, yeah, do you know what? That is stressing me out, that my cupboards are stressful. So why am I buying more stuff for my cupboard? Yeah, so that was the point that I thought.
Yeah, that's cool. And I think that idea of borrowing, I'm going to tell us quite a shameful story here now. When you mentioned about children's costumes and things like that, I'm a school governor, and I remember taking this to the governors afterwards going, this is ridiculous. I remember myself and my wife driving around trying to find a children's outfit for something, and we spent £26 so that my son could donate £1 to children in need, you know? And you're like, that's just insane, spending £26 for an outfit so they could turn up at an event, donate £1, you know. It's just, it's shameful. I look back at it and it did make me think about our consumption of stuff. But anyway, so there was a couple of things there. Somebody's asked, where was it? Something about setting up costs. So in terms of setting up costs, presumably you've got your storage facility, haven't you? But in terms of what other costs are there to set up? I'll try and find the comment itself.
It really depends on the project and what you've already got. So the first one that we set up, we were really lucky in having some space. And from speaking to other libraries of things in the UK, we knew that that was the thing that everyone else was struggling with. Whereas that was the first thing that we had before we had anything else in place. So it really does depend on what you're doing and what you're trying to achieve. The other thing that we've really found is that, you know, having a paid role makes things move quickly. But if you don't have funding for a paid role, then just having a really core group of energized volunteers can be another way to do it. Somebody's mentioned Lend Engine. There is a cost to using Lend Engine that's £20 a month. So it's, you know, it's not excessive. But yeah, but it's kind of as much or as little really. If you had some space and £20 a month for Lend Engine, you could do it. You could do it really quickly. And sometimes, like the one in Penarth and like the first one we did in 2017, it's just a question of doing it and starting it. And then once it's kind of started to build a personality, then you go from there. Then you can apply for funding. Then you can do some fundraising within the community once you've got a presence and people know that you're there and they can start to kind of see what it looks like. But, you know, the one that I showed a picture of that we've been working on in Swansea, you know, there was a grant there was some funding that enabled them to do something on a slightly bigger scale and kind of create that beautiful space that I showed you. So it's very much a piece of string question. But I would say that they're, you know, most of the obstacles that we've seen are all surmountable with a little bit of energy and time put into them.
So again, the digital site as well, that came with being a member of
That's
Benthyg, is it? Yeah. So
no. So the Lend engine is something that our sort of network members sign up to themselves. They own the subscription for that. We don't kind of license it to anyone, but we have an agreement with Lend Engine that they clone the version, because it's the Lend Engine site. If you sign up as a Lend Engine member, the one you get is slightly different from the one that I showed you. So we've kind of tailored it to match the Benthyg branding and the Benthyg processes. So within our network, we've got an agreement with Lend Engine that if someone in our network signs up, they basically clone our version into our network members, so they all look the same, and then you can tailor it with your own logo and things like that. But we don't require that our network members have Benthyg branding. The one in Pembrokeshire is using different branding. The one in Swansea is using a combination. So it's again, it's like, it's very flexible.
Yeah. Let's, before I go on to some more questions on the side then, can you have a private library of things as a concept? So, you know, if you're a block of flats or a community within a housing association, you know, could you have a storeroom or something? I guess the argument of making it a formal library of things is you get that inventory and tracking and things, but surely there might be ways of doing this within a block of flats or something where you could share some resources.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there are certain things to think about, like you know, who's insuring, and then who's responsible for making sure that the kind of maintenance happens. But yeah, it would be perfectly possible to do that. And that's definitely something we want to explore this year, because we think there could be a real benefit there. I mean, I've spoken to you about this before, David. I'd love to see housing associations for it to be part of the planning process. You know, that a space is created in new builds for that purpose. And then people can check things in and out themselves.
Yeah, no, I think it makes sense. Okay, and so there's a charge for borrowing certain things, you said, yeah?
Yeah, so
very low price though, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that with the groups we're working with, like I say, we're not prescribing it. You know, it's up to them what they charge. The one in Swansea is charging a little bit more because that works for them, and it's being run by the council, and that's their decision. You could do it for free. It depends. You know, most organisations do it need to have some kind of revenue generation coming in, even if it's just to cover the cost of Lend Engine and the odd kind of, you know, pack of batteries or strimmer wire or whatever. But if you wanted to do it for free, there's no reason why you couldn't. It's not something that we decide. That's for communities to decide themselves. Also, you can add a membership fee. Other libraries of things, Benthyg is the only library of things in the UK that doesn't have like an annual membership fee, but it's up to communities if they wanted to add one. There's one library of things in Devon, I think, where they have a membership, a monthly subscription, but that gets automatically turned into credit. And so you pay sort of £5 a month, but then you've got £5 a month, you know, worth of borrowing fees ready to go. So it kind of encourages people to make the most of their membership. So there are lots of different ways to doing it. And again, that's something that we don't prescribe for communities. You know, we think communities should decide what's going to work best for them. Every community will be different.
And I've seen before the businesses have got involved as well. Like B&Q donated a number of items, didn't they, to a library of things? I can't remember if it was the West Cardiff one or was this one in London. I've read somebody.
I think it was in London. Yeah.
So it might be an opportunity, and I would imagine I'd say this to the housing staff here. You know, when it comes to things like pat testing and stuff, you've got apprentices, sorry, get my words in there, that could support that type of work, your maintenance teams and things, you know, to pat test 30, 40 electrical items every quarter, was it, or so? You know, it's not the biggest task in the world, but I can see already, though, in the comments, Rhys Norris, big fan of the concept. Can we come and visit when lockdown's lifted?
Thanks, Rhys. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I think it's something, the Skinner Street that's been mentioned. I had some conversations last night with people, maybe organising a little TPAS tour, you know, we can meet up, go and see the Library of Things in practice, the Repair Cafe, possibly even Swansea as well, you know, and maybe do a little bit of a visit and see it in action when it's up and running. This will be
Yeah.
way off, won't it? But
Yeah, but it is part of our intention for that project is to set up a steering group essentially of housing association members, staff and tenants, and get them down to see the Newport site more than once actually, and then talk about how it's working and really sort of proactively make that an opportunity to think about how it would work in different housing associations and sort of bounce ideas and suggestions and problems off each other. We're only going to learn if we kind of start thinking about how something that works in one place isn't going to work somewhere else, and how do we do that. So this is, in Skinner Street, it's going to be a huge opportunity for us to really get housing associations involved. So I would say, no, you can't visit once, you can visit multiple times and turn it into a dialogue. It's not going to be a passive visit of come and look at this and then go away and forget about it again. We really want to engage with you on this and understand how we can use this opportunity to develop some really significant learning for housing associations.
Yeah, I can see in the comments here, Sarah, up in Bronavon, which is Torfaen area, you look like you're on board on this. Marie, I don't know which way, Swansea or Newport, which way would you go from Bridgend? I'm not sure, but either way,
I'm talking to communities in Bridgend as well, so you might not have to go anywhere.
Oh, right, okay. So it sounds like there's some early work going on in Bridgend, right?
Yeah, there is.
Well, Marie, we can certainly... So you might want to get in touch with you to
Marie, if you want me to put you in touch with people who are currently working on this, they were planning to do it in Bridgend last year and then obviously scuppered by lockdown, and they're just picking it up again now to see where their communities are in terms of that appetite they had last year. So I'd love to put you in touch with them and see if we can join those dots. Yeah,
that'd be great. And Valley Coast, superb social landlord in that area, and might be able to be that extra 10% or so to make it happen. It's great. Does anybody want to say anything?
There's a few questions in the chat. Let me just look at the top. So Amanda Lawrence, sounds like huge storage in the background is needed. It's an interesting question. Yeah, I mean, ideally, you would have huge storage, but we kind of take the approach that you're not always going to have access to huge storage. And so how do you work around that? So if you don't have huge storage, then perhaps you just can't take large items and you start with smaller items until you can expand. Or maybe you find a kind of secondary space. So at the moment, the space that we're opening in Penarth is relatively small, but we're looking in Penarth. One exciting element of that project is we're going to have an electric cargo bike that will enable us to do collections and deliveries around Penarth, make sure everybody has access, even if they can't get to the high street. But also we're looking at finding a secondary space that's not quite as central as our main space, that's going to be a bit cheaper or even free for us to keep items. And then the cargo bike can kind of be the go-between between the two sites. So not having huge storage isn't a deal breaker. It's just, again, one of the many kind of pieces of string questions where you just might have to think a little bit outside of the box. And our approach is always just get started, get going, see how it works out, and kind of grow from there. Basically, it doesn't have to be perfect from day one.
So do you ever get ones that are purely specialist then? Because you mentioned, I remember reading about this, like in America, there's a lot of tool sharing or toy sharing and stuff. Are the ones you're seeing more multifunctional?
Yeah, so at the moment, the ones that we're working on are very multifunctional. We've got on our sort of template Lend Engine clone, there's about 17 categories of different items, and so it does really vary. But we're definitely open to doing specialist ones. And actually there's an organisation in Pembrokeshire that we've sort of working with as part of the bigger project, but a kind of surf shop that repairs wetsuits and things like that. We'd really like to work with them to do, I know lots of surf shops hire out kind of wetsuits and surfboards, but maybe they could have a Benthyg that's slightly kind of lower value stuff like kids wetsuits and bodyboards and things like that, so that that could be a specialist thing that again would be like tailored to its community, because that's something that you don't need in Newport but you might need it in Tenby. And then it's kind of meeting the needs of a community and really addressing an environmental problem that we all know is there around like polystyrene bodyboards. So it's definitely something that we're open to doing, and we think there could be huge benefits of doing it. Similarly, in Pembrey Sands, we've been looking at working with the community there to create a library of things that really specialises in camping equipment, because lots of people go to Pembrey to camp. So it's definitely something that's possible.
You're right. That bodyboard, you talked about the life cycle of a drill, how many times it's actually used. I reckon a bodyboard would rival a drill for a minimal amount of minutes actually ever used.
Unless you
Yeah.
happen to live in Porthcawl, then yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah, you're right. Good. So just more comments down the side there. Looks like Mel's keen to see the one in Swansea.
Oh, there's a comment up from 10:29 a.m. that we haven't answered yet.
Oh, sorry.
Adekanye. So will it attract any form of cost? Yeah, I've talked about that, about borrowing fees. It could do, but equally you could make it free if you wanted to, if you had the resource to. And the second question you've had there, Adekanye, what happens if I borrowed, if the item got borrowed or lost or damaged? Sorry, if it got lost or damaged. The answer to that question is we have a very kind of like open policy on that. We understand that items do get damaged or even lost, and we wouldn't hold anyone responsible. You know, they're sort of liable in terms of like if they injure themselves, then the liability waiver means that, you know, they're responsible for that. In terms of something just, you know, they can't bring it back or it gets damaged, we just accept it as part of what we do, basically. It does happen. And especially when we're lending out secondhand items, they have a finite lifespan. It might be that you use a drill and it's 10 years old, and it's because it's in a library of things, it's been used for more than 20 minutes in its lifespan, and you happen to be the person who uses it for the last time. That's fine. That happens. It's not something that we would penalize anyone for. We wouldn't expect people to pay any sort of penalty. There is, you can, as a community group running a library of things, you can charge a deposit on items, and so that can be, you know, a non-returnable deposit if the thing doesn't come back. We generally haven't done that, but it is an option. But we operate on a basis of goodwill and trust. You know, we don't assume that people are going to borrow our stuff and intentionally break or damage it or steal it. We are doing something that we want to be really positive for the community, and we believe that, you know, coming to that with a positive, constructive approach is the best way to do it. It may be that, you know, we change our minds in a few years' time and have to be a little bit stricter on it, but for now, that's very much our approach. And actually, we actively encourage people to tell us if there is a problem with the item, because we need to know. So if you borrow something and you drop it and it cracks, we want to have a kind of culture where you feel very comfortable coming in and telling us about that, because we need to know that in order to check it before it goes out to somebody else. We don't want to create a kind of, you know, sort of punishment, you know, consequence type expectation where you're more likely to just like put it in a bag and hand it over and not tell us that there's a crack on the casing of that drill, because that's going to cause a problem for the next person that borrows it. So all of our kind of literature and emails are very open about, like, we know accidents happen, just tell us if there's an issue and we won't blame you, we'll just try and fix it. So that's the answer to that question.
Cool.
And Amanda had another question after that. Is the risk issue put onto the individual volunteer? Is there a procedure? Yeah, so basically, yeah, we support our volunteers as much as possible in our processes. We've got this volunteer handbook and training and induction process and volunteer forms whereby volunteers can kind of, you know, flag the sorts of things that they want to learn about. So make sure that there are lots of development opportunities for volunteers, and the insurance will cover the volunteers. There are also things like risk assessments. And again, something that we want to do as a network as we grow is engage with volunteers on a network level and see how that's working, like check in with volunteers, because we're supporting communities to set up projects that are all slightly different, that all have slightly different personalities, and we're sharing our kind of template policies that some organizations are tailoring. We want to just, again, make sure that's an ongoing dialogue, that we're checking with volunteers about what their experience is like of being involved in a library of things and learning from that as we go. So it's something that we're hoping to kind of build on.
Yeah. So is there anything, sorry, what are the most popular items? So when I looked at the Penarth one last night, I was like, power washer, I've never used one before. Don't really want to go buy it for the little amount of thing I need. So it's perfect for borrowing it for a couple of pounds and giving it a go, you know.
Yeah.
Exactly, to avoid buying one. I've avoided one most of my life so far, and I don't intend to start now. So,
well, you'll get addicted to it, honestly. You'll want to be doing it every weekend. It's so rewarding.
The other one was vacuum carpet cleaner, I've heard, is a popular one, is it?
Yeah, carpet cleaners. No, so yeah, I mean the most popular items are pressure washer and gazebo. Particularly last year when we reopened after lockdown and everyone was meeting outside the gazebo, we had like 4 gazebos and they were just out constantly. So yeah, gazebos and pressure washers are things that are really popular. Other things tend to be quite seasonal. And again, like this is with the caveat that we're very much scratching the surface here. We're at the beginning of understanding what people want to borrow. We're at the beginning of raising the awareness. And so the things that I identify as trends now might be completely different in 12 months from now. But we have found in the past that other things tend to be seasonal. Last autumn, hedge trimmers, leaf blowers, and food dehydrator were all really popular. So you can kind of see what people are doing at different times of the year. And yeah, so we're kind of trying to understand those trends. And I think a lot of it will change as people get used to the concepts. And I think we'll probably see differences in different communities as well. And also according to where the items are. So in Penarth, where it's going to be on a high street with this electric cargo bike, there'll probably be differences from Swansea, where it's at a recycling centre, where everyone who goes there has their car because that's the only way you can get to the centre. So there'll probably be a difference in the kinds of things that people are likely to borrow there, as opposed to the sorts of things they might pick up in their shopping bag while they're out buying some meat for the Sunday roast. So I think there are lots of differences. And as I say, like we're at the beginning of understanding what people want to borrow, and having consistent systems in use will enable us to collate data and hopefully tell a really interesting story in the next kind of 12 to 24 months.
Davin's mentioned there about sharing skills that go with it, as well as items and resources. And I think that was a theme we touched on yesterday afternoon, bringing together not just the library things, but the repair cafe, running skill sessions in those centres as well, how to teach people to do things themselves. So it's all very well having like a sewing machine. If you don't have the skills to use it, you know, I've got 3 in my loft at the moment now.
Oh, I know somewhere you could donate those.
You, all right. I've been an executive for a will for a couple of people recently, so I don't know what to do with them, but it's because people don't know how to use them properly. So I think there's something about bringing the skills at the same time. I don't know if you've got an experience of this or seen this in other places where Library of Things have combined with Community Fridge or I don't know. Yeah.
It's something that a lot of Library of Things do, and it's something that we're really keen to do and build on. And having this close partnership with Repair Cafe Wales does make it that bit easier, because you've got experts who, you know, are keen to volunteer anyway. And exactly as you say, it's a real opportunity to not only borrow the thing, but learn how to use that thing and keep those skills within your community. And we think there's real potential there as well for like small businesses. You know, that there is a risk with a Library of Things that you might, you know, small businesses might worry that you're going to be a competitor. And we think it's really important to kind of reassure local businesses that that's not the intention, and to work with them as closely as possible. And so, for example, if you've got like a local hardware store, we'd really like to see the Libraries of Things in our network kind of collaborate with them to do a kind of skill sharing workshop. And then that hardware store can, at the same time as they're showing people how to use a drill safely, can kind of get to know the people who are going to be using a drill. So when somebody borrows a drill from the Library of Things from the first time, they know that they can go to the local hardware store to just check they've got the right drill bits and check they've got the right screws, and that they're then buying those items from the hardware store. And then you're creating more of a sort of sense of community in that kind of 20-minute town of like, you can pop out and get everything you need, including the advice and the skills from your friendly local hardware store owner. So we think there's really huge potential there to sort of keep all of this knowledge within communities at a time when, you know, we're going to need it more than ever, I think. So yeah, that's something we're definitely planning to build on. We've worked quite closely with an organisation called Green Squirrel, based in Splot. That's where, I don't know if anyone here is from East Cardiff. They're running the Railway Gardens project, where they're basically turning a kind of disused space in Splot into a lovely kind of green community hub. And they're really good at doing skill sharing stuff. They do a lot of kind of workshops on gardening and on sort of sustainable living, how to, you know, kind of make your own cleaning products and things like that. We've done sessions with them and Repair Cafe Wales where they're kind of, you know, sharing those repair skills. And then that's a really good opportunity for Repair Cafe volunteers to say, this is how you fix a chair. And for us to say, if you need the tools that you've just seen, you can come and borrow them from us. So like there's, again, it's all about kind of understanding what's in your community, whether it's an organization or an individual or a business, understanding where those skills are and just making sure that you're kind of maximizing the use of those resources and putting people together. That's what we love more than anything, is putting people together, going like, oh, I know somebody who does that, let's get them involved in this, and just creating something that showcases your community and makes everybody feel really proud to be a part of it. You know, that's something that we can, I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it. I'm such an old romantic, like that. We need that, don't we, to like know who your neighbors are and to kind of know what their skills are and be able to say, oh, can you help me with this? You know, it goes way beyond borrowing stuff from our point of view.
I think you're right. I do accept the romance of this, but I also think practically for some of the housing association and council staff here, things like being able to borrow a strimmer for £1 or £2 might help with some of your issues with gardens and stuff like that, you know, being able to borrow a lawnmower if the space allows, you know, it's got to be good for some of your, you know, some of the issues that come up on the estates and stuff is neighbours not maintaining gardens and things like this. If you could borrow some of these tools, it's just a practical thing that could actually help with the community issues we sometimes see, you know. So yeah, I think it's why I wanted this session to happen, because I love this subject. It looks like you've got some fans up in North Wales as well. Lowry there from Group Cynefin.
Please get in touch, Larry. That would be great.
It was certainly, I think, as you say, we want to see this all across Wales. Every community should have one, really, you know.
And not just one per town. It's not like we're looking at Swansea now and going, all right, we've done Swansea, tick. You know, you think Swansea should have like 15 libraries of things, because you shouldn't have to get in your car every time you want to borrow something, you know. So we want to see them on every street corner, really.
Yeah. So there's Amanda saying she'd love to help start one in Barry, which is good.
There might be something in the pipeline there. We're just waiting to hear back.
Good. But, I think Amanda would be keen to.
Great.
And I know Newydd yesterday, who operate a lot in Barry. I think there was a lot of interest from some of the Newydd staff yesterday when it was touched on during the Repair Cafe talk. So let's see.
You know that the council is keen, and we've got a couple of other sort of keen partners there. So Barry's definitely in our sights. So either it's going to work and it's going to happen, in which case I'll loop you in, or if it doesn't happen, I'll loop you in and we'll make it happen a different way. So get in touch.
Cool. Reece, I totally agree. I'd rather see library things on every street corner than Costa.
Totally. I mean, we haven't even touched on high street regeneration. Like, I think that's a really valid point. We are seeing, and we are going to see more empty units on our high streets, and like creating a reason for people to go to high streets, which is why I'm really excited about the Penarth one, because it's in it's in a shop on a high street. You know, we're creating more opportunities for people to go out into their high street, and while they're there, they might pick up other things. So very exciting.
There is
to libraries things.
The next couple of years, we are going to see, you know, an increase in some of that surplus space, and that's the reason. And that's what I like about some of the stuff Newport City Homes are doing there, which is they recognise that in those retail units and are looking to do something a bit more creative with those units. I'd say more to come on that, but Skinner Street is definitely going to be the place to go and visit, I think, in the future.
It is,
Good. I'm conscious of time. I know Ella's got to get to Penarth to open it at 12 o'clock. It's the latest one. So anybody got any last questions? Or if not, I hope you've found this useful. Thank you, Ella, for coming today. Will you be able to, can I share the slides with the people?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
That's great. We'll make those available. Yana will do her stuff on Monday and get them out to you, as will a recording here. I hope you found this free session useful, and that I think this is a very fitting end to our decarb week. I think I like practical things we could go and do, not just some of the bigger issues in decarb. And thanks very much. Right. Elizabeth, you've come on screen. Is there anything you wanted me to say? Have I missed anything? Elizabeth's been the organizer of this week, to be honest. I'm just often the public face of it.
I just wanted to say, but my computer's freezing again like it did yesterday. So I just wanted to thank everybody, but also that you're going to receive a link from Zoom about feedback. So, or do poll, sorry. So if you could give feedback about the week or about this session, that would be absolutely wonderful. Thank you.
That's great. And as I say, I think there's going to be, look out for stuff. We'll keep your name. I think there could be some scope for doing some visits as the right time and when it's safe and people are comfortable. But I think, oh, sorry, Rhiann's got a finger up there.
Is there anything in the pipeline in Ceredigion?
You got Ella on the phone.
No, there isn't. I'd love there to be.
Pardon?
I'd love there to be.
Yeah.
Well, there are then.
Yeah. I think given the software has come from there as well, it feels
Exactly.
like
we
we should
need
have
to,
one,
yeah.
shouldn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm in Lampeter and I'd be interested to help out.
Oh yeah, please do get in touch then.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing is working with the local authority, with housing associations, those stakeholders that might have a room or a space or I've even seen it out of
Well, there's a new shop opened in Lampeter. It's called Climate Change Shop. So maybe you could link in with them.
Yeah, brilliant.
So
That's in Lampeter. It's in the old post office.
yeah,
Okay.
and I think that's the point is that these spaces they could even be storage containers as well. I've seen one somewhere in London. There was a storage container. So yeah, great. There's lots of enthusiasm here. I love this. It's a good way of finishing on a Friday. So thank you all. I better stop the recording.